Hello and welcome to Fast Talk, your source for the science of endurance performance. I'm your host, Trevor Connor, here with Coach Rob Pickles. For most of us, the fall is when we take a break from hard training, let our diet slip, and go do some of those fun things that we had to forgo at the height of the season. Whatever we choose to do, the one thing we all understand is that doing a bunch of hard training and intense interval work right now isn't going to do anything to help our season come next spring. So if training takes a back seat at this time of year, the big question becomes, are there other things we can do now to help set ourselves up for the next season? The answer, fortunately, is a lot. This is the time to figure out our gear and make sure it's all set up correctly. Put another way, getting a new set of shoes and figuring out where the cleats go and any aches and pains they cause is a low-risk thing to do in November. But it's playing Russian roulette with your target event in June if you change out your shoes 3 weeks before. Joining us today to discuss this challenge are two top experts on getting our gear set up for success. We'll talk with show regular Dr. Andy Pruitt, who invented the BG Fit system, and master fitter at Full Cycles, Ryan Ignatz. They'll talk with us about the best time to make changes, the need for repeated fits and a pre-fit, and the challenges of getting our indoor bike set up correctly. We'll also talk about how to know when things like saddles, pedals, and cleats are worn. But we won't just talk about gear. We'll also discuss stretching and weight training in the off-season, and whether it's a good time to do physiological testing. Finally, we'll discuss the impact of indoor platforms like Zwift that offer racing all year round on the traditional off-season. So double check your bike, saddle, and shoes, and let's make you fast. Well, welcome back, Andy. Ryan, welcome to the show. This is the first time for you. We're excited to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
What about me?
What about you?
Oh, you're here.
I am. I'm sitting in the corner like I'm not even here.
Well, you kind of blend in with the black things on the wall.
That happens. What are we talking about today, Trevor?
Well, so it is October, November-ish. This means a lot of people have just taken their time off. So we're talking about getting ready for the new season. And look, we've done episodes on the training, what to do when you finish your off season and get back on the bike or put back on the running shoes. A couple episodes you can check out for that are episode 28 and episode 140. So we're going to talk more about getting everything else ready. The gear, making sure that you set yourself up to avoid any sort of injuries. Hence the reasons we've invited the two of you here. So where would you like to start? Andy, you made the point before we got going here that it's impossible to separate it from the training. So even though this is a gear conversation, let's start there. You're not racing until March. It's October, November. How important is training at this point?
Well, I think the fall is all about experimentation. What didn't you like about your past season? What kind of aches and pains did you produce during the season? What's lingering at the end of the season? So it's really about experimentation. Is there something about your equipment, your shoes, your footbeds, cleat position, worn out parts like worn out cleats? You just watch the World Championships on TV and you're going, my God, I'd like to look like that, right? So is there some experimentation you want to do about your aerodynamics? I think that's what the fall is all about.
Okay. Ryan, any thoughts here?
Yeah, and working with a lot of athletes over the years, I think there's a time for reflection, and it is a reflection on those things that Andy just covered and thinking back to the season. Were there things limiting you during some of the events, whether that was some sort of lingering pain, whether that was some hot spot on the foot, whether that's just you were always uncomfortable by hour 4 in some part. Yeah, just anything related to that equipment limiting you. So reflect back on that and use this time while it's fresh in your mind to move forward and come up with a game plan.
I think some people find the fall and winter exciting because you maybe move indoors and really concentrate on what you want to do next spring. So getting your indoor setup, I know it's somewhere on our outline today, but getting your indoor setup so that it's attractive to you, that it's inviting to you, that there's no excuses not to go do it, right? I mean, you need to have your winter indoor setup in a way that you get up and you go do it. You don't have to set it up. It needs to be inviting.
Yeah, and Andy, I want to touch on something you mentioned before, which was, hey, people are watching the World Championships. Maybe they're seeing some riders they want to emulate. They want a little bit more aerodynamic position. And we're probably going to talk about some bike fit today, given the guys that are in the room. But, when we're discussing training at this point in time, we have to remember that if we do want to achieve these positions that are going to put our body at was probably an end range of motion previously, right? To get a little bit lower in the front, maybe adjust our seat height a little bit, then we're going to have to be training the body through a range of motion as well. And that needs to start now. As a relatively inflexible person, I will tell you, you do not overnight just change the range of motion that you need. So if you are planning on bike fitting or whatever in the future with the goal of becoming more aerodynamic, start those range of motion exercises today. Don't start them after your fit appointment.
And or explore technical changes, equipment changes, crank arm length, forearm extension, angulation, all those different things that may allow you to achieve a more aerodynamic position without all the pain and suffering of increased range of motion. So it's that time of year. It's experimentation.
This is that experimentation you're talking about right now. Don't do it in April or May when your time trial season is getting hot and heavy. Do it in November when it doesn't really matter if your performance is top notch or not.
So that question was a little bit biased, obviously, towards the racer who has a season that's starting in March or April. And this is kind of the point when there's no races going on unless you're a cross racer. But what about the recreational rider who doesn't have races? Does this apply to them? Should they just keep riding, do their thing? Or is it good for them to also have a down period where they focus on these other things?
Well, if you're looking at me, I think that the tourist or the event rider, they've all had a peak in their summer, whether it was Ride the Rockies, it didn't happen this year, whether that's Ragbar, great ride across Iowa. There's a lot of things that the type of rider you're talking about actually do have a goal in this season. Once you reach your goal, physiologically, you do need a downtime. You cannot maintain a peak. You cannot.
And I think that there's a natural ebb and flow of the volume and time that people are putting into riding, right? And as the weather gets cold here and the clocks change, people are naturally going to be riding less, even if they are more of an adventure-minded individual.
But now here's a question for you. Does the whole explosion of indoor training throw this on its head? Because I can tell you there were no actual formal races here in Colorado, at least this summer. There's a whole lot of big races on Zwift. For those people, do we need to shift? Was the summer their downtime and now they're getting into form? Or
So, Ryan, do you have people come to you as a fit consultant purely to get their indoors Zwifting setup perfected?
Yeah, I definitely do have some people who partly, I think the demands indoors are different in terms of the static nature of it. Some people are trying to find more dynamic nature to that indoor riding. But yeah, there are people who want me to figure out how to set up their new Zwift bike or their whatever branded bike they have indoors that's not exactly like their true outdoor bike. And there are limitations to some of these bikes as well. So what they're doing even indoors is not even translating to outdoors. So being more conscious and aware of what it is that you're setting up, I think is important.
I've got a neighbor who does 90% of his training indoors and only rides his outdoor bike when he races.
Yeah.
I think it's absurd, but nonetheless, if they come to you with this request, how closely do you want those bike setups to be?
Yeah, I would try to make them as close as I can. Unless there's somebody who really just wants to have an indoor easy volume riding bike, maybe that's a little more upright, maybe a little less TT if they know they're not coming out swinging and racing right away, maybe just to give them an alternate position to settle into over the winter as a form of some exercise while they're also doing some other cross training. But otherwise, yeah, I would try to make them very similar.
I don't know if this goes along with the outline, but I want to tease into this a little bit more because Ryan, you did mention, the position is maybe a little bit more static. And I know I certainly experience this when I ride my long, long hours that I do on Zwift, which if anybody knows, I make it about 48 minutes and then I kick the bucket. But are there considerations, and Andy, Ryan, this is for both of you, right? You're sitting in a relatively constant position. You're not shifting your weight. Do we have to be thinking about, is the exact same saddle indoor and outdoor? Is that the right choice? My road bike lives on the trainer. I haven't taken it off the trainer in forever, but I'm riding the same saddle that I have on my outdoor bike. Should I be thinking about something different?
I think that's person dependent. Some people can get away with that consistent saddle in both places. Yeah, when it comes to that static nature, though, things do pop up that may be different indoors versus outdoors where it's more dynamic. So I definitely see that.
Well, I'm a big believer in that our undercarriage, our crotch, is tissue which is not designed to bear weight. So change for the sake of change sometimes is healthy. I think that a similar saddle design should be on all your bikes. That does not mean that the padding and structure of the saddle shell should necessarily be the same on all your bikes. And chamois choice can also vary winter, I use a little thicker chamois indoors than I would normally ride out. I'm a minimalist outdoors, and I'm more of a maxi pad on the indoor bike because of these differences. I think gravity is more an issue on us on the indoor bike than outdoor bike because we stand, we get stop signs, there's all these different changes where we get to unload the undercarriage. And the indoor bike, it's just, you're just stuck to the saddle. Although I do encourage myself and others to make their indoor riding more dynamic, more outdoor-like, right? Stand, sprint, do all those different things. Can the saddle be different? It can be different in my purview, but it needs to be a similar concept where you want to bear weight on most of your skeletal structures, not on the soft tissues, not on the midline, whether you're male or female.
It can't be so different that it's now an inappropriate saddle for you.
Correct. You can't just throw the leftover saddles on your indoor bike. So many people put their junker on the trainer. And I just think that junker needs to be set up very similar, if not exactly the same as what you're going to be training on.
Yeah. And I feel like for the indoor rider who's just doing more base through that wintertime indoor season, a little less intensity, then possibly a little more upright position is just better. Or whether that's just sitting in the tops more, whether that's, raising it up a centimeter or two, spacer stack. I do feel like having just a little different weight distribution tends to be easier when you're just in that, zone 2 kind of riding.
I have so much sweat in my stem and steer tube right now. There is no raising of my handlebars at this point. The bike's probably not even safe to ride outside anymore. But for everyone else who's not in that position, probably a good idea.
So that's for the episode of indoor bike maintenance, right?
Yeah.
Well, you and I were talking about this last week. I don't cut off the top of my fork right down to the stem because I want in the winter to be able to bring it up and be a little less aggressive on my back.
I was riding with Flora Duffy one day and she made fun of me because of how much steer tube I had sticking up. Ever since then, my ego has been trashed. Thanks a lot, Flora.
She can ruin your ego in lots of ways. So
she was destroying me riding up left-hand at the time. I had literally no comeback.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Okay, let's first talk about, is this a good time to be replacing some of your gear, and what should you be looking at? Is this when you want to get a new bike? I know keeping your shoes lasting 5-6 years is not a great idea. Should you be getting new shoes at this point in the year? What are some of the considerations in terms of gear that you should be looking at replacing or not looking at replacing?
Yeah, somebody who is also around retail a lot, I see, one, time is changing, right? So if you are still riding maybe more mornings or evenings, outside of work hours, then having some lights, making sure that you're safe there. I mean, you should probably have the lights anyways just for daytime riding, but maybe you change the light intensity. You start hitting 1,000, 1,500 lumens on a front light just for actual visibility versus car visibility. Right. So things like that might be important.
And on this point, I do want to stress, riding at night is awesome. If you have a light setup that is worthy, it is so much fun. It will keep you riding longer into the year. When the clocks change, you don't have to. My kids ride with Boulder Junior Cycling and practice starts at 4:30 and it literally is dark 10 minutes after practice.
That's right.
They do 2 hours with lights on specifically in parks. It's incredible. They have so much fun and you should too.
Yeah, there's a quietness in the night that you just don't get during the day.
And you feel like a badass because you're the only person out there, let's be honest.
I still remember 20 years ago doing the night mountain bike rides where you had that giant light that was probably 200 lumen and you had a battery that had to go in your water bottle cage because it was enormous.
Yeah, I night ride basically 2 times a year. In the summer, in the peak of the heat, I like to get out at night. And then kind of when the clocks change, you go too late in the year, it's a little bit too cold without any sun radiant heating. But anyway, Ryan, back to you. I took us on a tangent.
Yeah, as far as other equipment, this is a good time often for deals too. Not that deals should drive your decision making. Make those decisions based on what were your needs, what didn't meet your needs during the season. What was bothering you? Was it too tight of a toe box and you just toughed it out because you paid $400 for these shoes? Start to make those decisions now towards something that works better for you.
Especially if you're changing brands of something, whether that's changing brands or styles of saddles, changing brands of shoes. I mean, the Specialized shoes is more biomechanically inclined. So if you're going to make that kind of switch either away from or to a biomechanically designed shoe, the wintertime's a nice place to decide whether that's going to work for you or not.
Again, because it gives you the time to put in and to learn and to adapt when it's less risky, when it doesn't matter quite as much.
I work with some athletes that are on that cusp of early professional career, and often this is a time of sponsorship change. And so for those athletes, my recommendation is don't just go for the sponsorship that gives you stuff just to have a sponsor. Get the stuff that works with you, that aligns with you, that is not going to disrupt you or reduce your performance just because you get it for free or get it at a discount.
You'll actually be a better ambassador for that brand.
Totally.
If you sought out that brand because it really worked for you, then you're going to be a better ambassador than somebody calls you, hey, we're going to give you a bunch of free stuff. And you go, okay, cool. And it doesn't work for you. You're not going to be a very good ambassador
That's
for
right.
it. So good point on the sponsor changes.
Yeah, I start to see that right now.
Yeah.
So I do get some consultation time with that, just figuring out, hey, is this bike even going to fit me? They've been riding one bike for a long time. It's working well. And then they switch brands and all of a sudden it doesn't even work.
So, Ryan, because you are associated closely with retail, if somebody wants to investigate handlebar angulation or crank arm length, those are expensive endeavors, right?
They are now.
So, crank
how-
length is a common one now. I've been around that conversation for a long time, partly coming from the multi-sport world and just believing in that idea, but then the equipment wasn't really caught up. Now we import from Taiwan a brand, Proder, who they have solutions in this. There's a few out there, but somebody could rent time with a set of cranks that is fully adjustable down to 140 millimeter length. So pretty broad range of lengths that you could experiment with. And we can start to figure out these details of what opens up your hip, where do you still hold power well, but can do it sustainably. So they're becoming better and better solutions.
So they're rentable?
I make it rentable.
What a great idea. I mean, you could invest a couple $1,000 and all of a sudden have it failed. And what about the forearms for time trialing and triathlon?
We do have different options available, at the store to test. So some of that we do during the fit process where I just have different equipment around that I can put on the bike and just test in real time and let people experience it. Even if it's just for a short amount of time, I think it's really valuable to the rider to know, wow, I thought I was going to love this. I don't, or I didn't even know this was possible.
Can I ask, and maybe this is it's going to be a little bit of a biased answer, perhaps because you're both, incredible bike fitters, but I want you to be as objective as possible. How many of these equipment changes that we're discussing, how many begin with a bike fit? Or are there appropriate things for people to do? As a rider, I feel like maybe a shorter crank length is important, right? But are people considering now the distance from your pedal to your saddle is different? Now your fore aft is different because the crank arm.
Andy's going to jump all over.
Should people start with a bike fit, or are there equipment things that people can experiment with that maybe don't require that full service?
Well, bike fit is not a one and done. Bike fit should be something that you consider throughout your season. Your body changes, your musculature tissue density changes, lots of reasons why a position may not feel the same to you at a different time of the season. So this is easy for me to say because I'm now retired and I'm not trying to sell bike fits. I think bike fit should be something you do 3 or 4 times in a 12-month span, right? And you should have a bike fit consultant that knows you, has records of your position, and you just go in for a quick, kind of like a dental cleaning, right? You go in and get a spot check. So bike positioning, bike fit, it's an ongoing physiological process for any serious cyclist.
Agreed. Yeah.
Ryan's like, okay, perfect.
We offer, some reduced rate follow-ups just for this purpose, just so for the people who have a big picture, we know where we're headed, what we're trying to do. Either that's, a couple things throughout the season that we're trying to change or manipulate to try to improve performance. Then let's not make so much the cost the barrier to coming back in and the time commitment a barrier to coming back in. Let's make it more accessible. So we do that internally and just offer some more of those quicker follow-ups. So it might still be an hour, hour and a half, but we're really diving into what is working, what is not. Let's try to address those things and keep moving forward with a good plan.
Many of my patients over the years were not local, right? They flew in from wherever. And so I had 2 or 3 hours to deal with them, and then you send them off with their new position. I tried not to let them leave Boulder without all the changes made. But then we had to stay in close contact because they're not going to come back from Florida on a regular basis. It is a thoughtful process. It takes time, and that you talked about the adaptation time. So give me an example. Somebody comes in and says, I want to experiment with crank arm length. So you spend time with your adjustable cranks in your office, You come up with what you think is going to work. What do you give them as an adaptation time?
I'd say it depends on the person's volume overall, but definitely a couple 100 miles, I feel like really tells the story. The first time is not always the best time. Also a reason why I don't really fit around power. You know, some people want to see that number in real time or heart rate, but it may not be there. You know, maybe it's even under until they have a couple of rides to really adapt to it.
Very important point, well backed up by research as well. Oftentimes people are most efficient in whatever position they're habituated to. You make a change, they become less efficient, but give them time to habituate, and they might be more efficient than they were initially.
Right.
There's some interesting work out of the University of Utah. Jim Martin has done some work with crank arm length where he blinded his subjects with 2 different crank arm lengths on each side. And within a very short amount of time, their body had adapted. And they were pedaling fairly efficiently on both sides, regardless of the crank arms being different. So his hypothesis is that adaptation happens pretty quickly as far as being able to turn the circle. But as far as being able to get you back your natural power, that's going to take some adaptation for the musculature to do that. So pretty interesting stuff. Anybody wants to research that?
He also, if people are interested in this topic, researched, I believe, a very wide range from like 140 millimeters to 240 millimeters.
Yeah, early on.
And there were obviously some differences in pedal velocity or whatever else, but the gist is not a very big change in power across a gigantic range. And here we are discussing the difference between 172.5 and 170.
And that was peak power, so
Yep.
it's not always what we're after. So we're looking at just efficiency or power over time.
My final statement on crank arm length is I think crank arm length is a fit tool, not a performance tool.
So one of the things I was thinking about coming into this episode, and I'm going to share a quick story from last week to kind of spark this conversation, is, Andy, agree with you. If you have the resources, getting a fit multiple times through the season is great. A lot of people only have the resources to maybe do it once a year or once every couple of years. And so the question is this the right time of the year to do it or not? And my feeling on this, and like I said, I'll share a story, is I think this might be one of the best times to get fit because it's in that off season or the base season when you are biomechanically habituating your body to the position. And so the story here is I saw Ryan last Monday, so a week ago, and he fit me. And one of the things that really surprised me is you commented you're not recruiting your glutes at all, which used to actually be kind of a forte for me. I was really good at bringing in the whole musculature. So I'm like, okay, what happened there? I guess I haven't been working on it. So he did some great work on my bike, and I've been riding better all week. But I ended up on the trainer on Sunday. It was pouring rain outside, and I wanted to get some racing in, getting ready for an event in a week. And I got on my trainer bike, and I don't know when's the last time I fixed the position on it, but realized it was in a horrible position. And I could feel myself. I'm like, I could not recruit my glutes on this bike right now if I tried in the position it's in. With the amount of time I spend in the winter on the trainer, I'm like, no wonder I become quad dominant. I was in a really bad position. And so the realization to me was asking that question, when's the best time to get fit? It's before you really habituate your body to the position. And I spent an entire winter habituating myself to just using my quads.
So we need to get your bike in so we can measure, we can compare and set them up the same.
Exactly. I mean, it's one of my notes right here. Indoor bike, outdoor bike should be set up the same.
I was surprised the difference in that I had never noticed it until now.
Well, that goes back to not that your indoor bike's a junker. Don't to be offended. But
All of Trevor's bikes are jumpers.
But we tend to
levels of
we tend to want to put a bike on a trainer and leave it there, right? It's a pain in the butt to take them on and off. So you've picked a bike, maybe the one that you don't care about so much, and boom, you need to make sure the saddle's right. All those things. Pedals. I use a pair of shoes that kind of just lay by my indoor bike. And it hit me the other day. Man, when was the last time I changed these footbeds? A long time since I changed those footbeds on the indoor shoes. So yes, keeping up to date on the indoor stuff is just as important as keeping up to date on the outdoor stuff.
So Rob, you'll get a good laugh. It is my dedicated indoor trainer bike because I took it to a bike shop a few years ago to have some work done on it. They handed it back to me and said, we cannot ethically work on this bike.
They said, nope.
Not a bad thing for the indoor bike.
I bet it doesn't even have disc brakes, Trevor.
Do I own a bike with disc? Oh, I do. Actually, I have one bike with disc brakes.
It was a joke.
But they're not hydraulic. So is this a good time to get fit? And If you're doing it this time of year, what are the things you should be asking for? What are the considerations? Is the fit in November different from the fit if you go in June, in the middle of your season?
Yeah, that is a good question. It kind of depends on the athlete, I would say, what they are shooting for, what we're trying to accomplish with that fit. I think there's always the caveat that there's potential to change, but there's a already recommended what you're going to change, like why you're going to change it in the future, and here's when we're going to do that.
It depends on, too, why they're seeking the fit. If this is part of a regular routine checkup, then I think you start with your major fit whenever you do it, and you do your periodical checkups later. But most people came to me with a reason to get a fit. It was rarely that I just want to go faster, or I have X pain or Y pain, or what I changed sponsorship bikes and it doesn't feel good. They had a reason for coming. There had to be some impetus for it. I think it depends on if it's important in the fall or the spring. It's why they're coming. You got to solve their problem first and then move on to the other things.
Yeah. And I see, because I'm partly around retail and even not fully, but there's a lot of deals too. I'm seeing that people are bringing the new bike. So that's their reason why. Maybe it's we're just setting it up exactly like their other bike. Or maybe they've just never even had a fit. They have a new bike. They've read about this, heard about it through, some kind of media. And they're realizing, hey, I'm finally going to invest in myself. I'm going to come get a bike fit, or I'm struggling with something.
How many people end up maybe in a trap or making a poor decision because they say it's the off season, there are going to be deals. This bike is $2,000 off. I got to buy it. And then crap, it's the wrong size. It's the wrong frame. Are you undoing a lot? Is this a poor way for people to go about it? Should they be seeing you first?
Yeah, ideally, that's the ideal world. Not everybody thinks that way or even knows what that means, what possibility there is. But yeah, we do a lot of bike fitting ahead of time. That's the way to do it. Whether that's even using their old bike, making tweaks that maybe that bike can't even fully accommodate, and then using that to guide the decision-making process when looking at a new bike.
Even custom bikes can be wrong. And one of the saddest days in my career was a guy that had flown in from New York with this brand new custom bike. And the only thing custom about that bike was his name on the bill. It didn't fit him. I said, we cannot make this bike work for you. Can you imagine how devastating that is to somebody who had just bought a bike, custom bike, and there was no way that I can make that bike work for him? Yeah. Or there's the online purchase or the used purchase online. And there was a great deal, and it's so cool. It was somebody famous's bike, and it just won't work for them. So the pre-fit is really, really an important possibility to pursue if you're thinking about online purchase.
That is a fantastic point that I haven't thought about. That, yes, if you go and buy all your gear and then you go to somebody to be fit, they're working with what you got, and it might not be the best stuff, so you're not going to end up with the best fit. If you're at that point in the season where you're thinking about making a bunch of replacements, and so this kind of goes into the next topic of talking about saddle, shoes, pedals, going to the fitter first.
Right. And Trevor, to help this transition for you, something to consider that I've personally experienced a few times, you can buy shoes that fit and they can be on sale and life is grand. And then you go to the fitter, you put in the right footbeds, maybe you have to put in a Varus wedge or something like that. Suddenly you've taken up some volume in that toe box and that shoe doesn't fit anymore. Right. So that great deal, what are you going to do? You're going to shove your foot into a shoe that's now too small? Are you not going to use these tools that are aligning your biomechanics? Or are you going to let this $200 pair of shoes that was 50% off just sit in your closet?
Yeah, that's one of those conversations I hear all the time. Like, oh man, the deal I got on this is so great, and then they hold on to that belief that it was so great. They can't move away from it, right? They're just attached to it. So it's a sometimes tough decision for them. I'm just there to help create solutions and offer suggestions and ideas. And more often they go with those ideas, but not always, and they have to deal with that.
My line for you would be, I am your fit consultant. You're paying me to give you advice. What you do with the advice I give you is totally up to you.
So let's talk about shoes, saddles, and pedals. So first of all, how often should people be replacing these? I'm the retro grouch. Every one of my bikes is ancient, but I would never wear a pair of shoes for 5 years.
I never wear the same shoes 2 rides in a row. I have a problem, though.
What was her name? Melza Marco? You related to the...
That's funny.
So I'll just start there. The saddle is the center of the fit universe, period. If you change a saddle, even if you think it is the exact same saddle that you just are replacing because you broke it or it's worn out, they weren't made in the same line. The padding could be slightly different. There's going to be something different about that new saddle. So the saddle is the center of the fit universe. If you change your saddle, you have to consider saddle height, fore aft, reach. It can affect all of those because you may be adjusting your pelvis to sit slightly differently on this new saddle. All of a sudden the reach feels too long or the saddle's too high because the padding's thicker or more dense. So saddle changes cannot be made lightly.
Yeah, I mean, I see, we were just talking about footbeds too, they just wear out. So replacing those more regularly, I think is really important. It's really funny to think of somebody who had maybe 3 years on, like a basic footbed, off-the-shelf footbed that is foam-based, and then you go to put in a brand new pair. It's the same style of footbed, and they're blown away at the difference. And maybe that pain that was kind of coming up in their knee starts to dissipate, things like that. And it's like, well, this was a super simple, easy solution. So,
really a highly paid pro who was having medial knee pain. He'd been all over the team docs. He'd gone to the orthopedic surgeon. They were considering an exploratory arthroscope. And he said, I just run through my fit one more time. Is there something we can do? The only change we made was a new blue specialized footbed, and his knee pain went away.
I mean, parts wear out and they break, right? And Andy, you kind of briefly said it. I break saddles a lot. I don't know why. Maybe it's these birth-given hips that I have, but I constantly have cracked shells and everything. And if I'm not looking for it, I don't necessarily notice it because it's not something I can feel while I'm riding. Oftentimes I'll pick my bike up by the saddle and it'll like, wait, that flexed more than it should have. And I'll look and there'll be a crack. Got to replace it because it's not supporting you correctly. The other end of the spectrum too, we look down at shoes, we look at cleats, right? That is providing the stability for the other half of the structure.
Yeah.
We talk about top-down support and bottom-up support as well. That cleat wears out, it's not holding your foot in the right position. Maybe it's allowing, too much eversion or inversion, and cleats are pretty cheap to replace. Do it ahead of time. The things that are less cheap to replace are oftentimes on the mountain bike shoe, where a lot of that support comes from those little outrigger pod treads next to the cleat. Those begin to wear down. You see people's feet are rocking to the outside. Their biomechanics are totally altered at that point. So stay on top of these things and get them replaced and fixed. Just like replacing your chain before you smoke your chain ring in your cassette, be looking at these other pieces along the line as well.
Couldn't agree more.
Yep.
Absolutely. Pedals. There are pedals that provide superb biomechanical support, especially road pedals. We have way more options to provide great support and assure good alignment on road pedals. Off-road pedals, cyclocross, oh, geez, I need to clear mud or I need to do all these different things. So I actually had patients that would train in an SPD, right? Because it gave them better support, and they would race in a Crank Brothers or something for the mud clearance. And you throw away a lot of support when you go to that spring-loaded, open-based mud-clearing pedal. You lose a lot of support there. But for race day, it's only an hour. They had race shoes and race pedals, but then they had training shoes and training pedals, so they would have the support for their hours. There's a lot to be said about it. Any spring-loaded cleat is going to fatigue. The spring's going to fatigue. So suddenly that endpoint you think you have has increased because the spring is worn out or the metal cleat's actually even worn. So keeping up on cleat and pedal is as important as keeping up on your saddle, no doubt.
So how often should you be replacing all these things?
I never ride the same pedals 2 rides in a row. That one was a joke. The shoe one wasn't.
Well, let's remember who you used to work for. Why you have so many shoes.
Well, I've worked for Specialized and
Shimano. Yeah.
I have, a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And Pearl, yeah.
How often? I think it depends on the hours, right? I mean, a brass cleat, wow, they have a very short life.
Yeah.
A very short life. Let's go back decades. And the black look cleat was a brand new thing, right? So we went from toe straps and sloppy slotted cleats to a ski boot-like binding, click, and you had no movement. The knee is the victim caught between the foot and the hip. So the epidemic of knee injuries that occurred with the invention of the black look cleat. So simultaneously, I'm trying to figure out what are the solutions this from a fit and equipment standpoint, and my orthopedic partners are trying to figure out surgeries to resolve all these injuries that are occurring because of the black look cleat. So along comes the time cleat and pedal system, which was a brass cleat, right? So we went from a fixed position, black look, to the spring-loaded time system with a brass cleat. And the injury associated with the black cleat were really, really, for the most part, resolved. And a whole new set of injuries occurred with this sloppier system that allowed for more movement. So my point is the truth is always going to be someplace in the middle. And really, it's your fit consultant that's going to help you find that truth in the middle. As a little sidebar to the brass cleat, which provides really a lot of flexibility, a lot of mobility, and that connection, and they wear out very fast, right? So there's a lot of things to consider. Cycling is simple. When Da Vinci invented the bicycle, this was a simple mode of transportation. It is no longer a simple child's tool. It is a very complicated apparatus.
So shoes and saddles, what are signs to say time for new ones?
Aches and pains.
Yeah.
Saddle sores.
Something feels different.
Loss of power.
Just
there's anything.
Sometimes physical, or you can see the wear, but you might not be, I don't know, I guess savvy enough to see the wear. So the consultant can be really helpful, or even somebody at the service center at your local bike shop. You know, they might see some of those signs of wear that you just don't know to look for.
And I'll go on a limb and say it's probably pretty hard to give a hard number. 1,000 hours. I don't know. Everybody rides differently. You know, some people are more demanding on their equipment.
Some people are more in mud and some people are in super dry. So all those things matter.
If there's any obvious sign of wear or damage, it's too late at that point. You know, you should have gotten to it before that. But prior to that, I don't know. I think personally it's hard to say.
Yeah. I was just thinking of like an interesting example of a rider. She used to do around 400 miles a week of riding. She's a world champion, whatever. But she, every probably month and a half, 2 months, we'd tell her about her chain is worn, right? So, you know, it's not a fit-oriented part, but it's just something that is wearing out. She's very powerful. She's climbing a lot. And she just thought we were duping her into just selling her more stuff. And then, you know, I started trying to give her some numbers, like the chain lasts, you know, this time, somewhere around 1,000 to 1,500 miles. How many miles are you doing? You do the math. Yeah, this is time.
And a chain checker, like we talked about, you know, is very easy to use, relatively inexpensive. Get one, check your chain.
Yeah.
When it says it's worn, it's worn. Doesn't matter if it's still shifting good. That's the point. Get a new one on there.
So that idea then, trying to translate that idea of a chain checker to footwear, maybe you clip the shoe in without being on the bike and just move it around. And if it has a lot of movement and play, then things might be worn.
And if you're doing that regularly, you'll know what it feels like when things are good, and you'll be able to begin to feel when things aren't so good anymore.
That's right.
Another area that's near and dear to my heart is chamois. Chamois wear out. Those 10-year-old shorts, one, the elastane, the spandex is gone. Those things are baggy. We don't want to see you in those. But that chamois is not providing you the support that it used to as well. They are, for the most part, just open cell foams, and that stuff does break down over time with multiple washings, multiple loadings, so on and so forth. So get some new shorts too.
And the more chamois lubricant cream you use, the quicker you're going to kill your chamois. They're almost impossible to get clean. To me, the more you're using some kind of chamois cream, whether that's Vaseline or some kind of water-soluble based one, the more of that you're dependent on, that tells me there's something wrong with your saddle choice and your fit. Like fit discussions should begin at the glove wall, right? If a guy comes in looking for new gloves for more padding, he doesn't need more padding. He needs a bike fit. Right. So I want to go back to the pedal and stance width. So Ryan, in the wintertime, I ride a fat bike a lot in snow, in deep snow, in cleated boots. My stance width is so whacked.
It's like you're riding a horse.
Yeah.
Anyway, so how often in the wintertime, how many fat bike fits are you doing? Or are people so lax about, it's just a fat bike, I don't need a fit? And the stance width is so different. Is that something we need to consider?
Yeah. I mean, it's something to consider. I know some people might struggle with that. For sure. And then there's a crank length portion to that that's happening all at the same time. There's no way to just make it narrower. You can go to a narrow pedal, but the boots that you might wear are definitely going to force even wider stance width. So I'd say it's rider dependent, but some riders may struggle with it.
I didn't mean to throw you under the bus. I knew that was a hard question.
Yeah, totally.
Because there are people who just cannot ride fat bikes.
That's right.
Cannot ride.
Yeah.
I will tack on to that too, though, and say, I find that my stance width tends to be a little bit wider when I'm just wearing my winter insulated shoes. And that's a little bit thicker, or you have some nice thick shoe covers and they're rubbing on the crank. So there is a lot of consideration here, not even just fat bike, Andy, but for regular riding too.
Probably majority of riders can tolerate some of that width change, but not every rider for sure.
And the good news is we're not riding them forever and ever and ever, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's once or twice a week, and they're relatively short because it's cold out there. 2 hours on a fat bike in deep snow, I'm toast.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Trevor, I'm looking at your outline here, and you have wheels ? And I'm going to say no. You should not be buying new wheels. I'm a wheels are a race day accoutrement person myself. I don't think people should be out riding, their race day carbon wheels all the time, especially not in the winter.
Yeah.
But should you be buying your race wheels now and then put them away until the racing season starts?
Put a bow on them, open them for Christmas.
Again, there can be deals in the off season or into the fall as equipment gets cleared out. So if you know generally what your reason for purchasing them, how is it going to improve your performance? Sure, it could be a good time to find that equipment. We could say that it's obsolete by spring, as far as the marketing is concerned, but in general, they're pretty small advancements as we go. Tires would be more important to me.
Counterpoint, you're going to go get a bike fit. You're going to need a new bike. It's going to be on a different drivetrain system. Your free hub isn't going to work. You shouldn't get the wheels now.
Yeah.
Bam, another point on my side.
And you may just want to change to your really basic training wheel at this time of year, just because there tends to be more stuff on the road, more wet weather, things like that you just don't need to put the wear and tear on nicer bearings that might be in those race wheels. Yeah. Maybe get those race wheels serviced. A lot of them might even come with ceramic bearings. The grease in those to make them fast and make them smooth and give you that benefit needs to get serviced more regularly. The more expensive the car, fancy the car, the more maintenance it might need. So tire choice, though, I think is more important.
Disc brakes have made it harder to switch wheel sets just for the sake of switching wheel sets. All right, getting that disc brake lined up to match perfectly as you change wheel sets. That has discouraged a lot of people from having race wheels versus training wheels.
I helped somebody on Slow Twitch the other day, and I said this exact thing. If you're going to do it, get the same hubs between the wheels. The rims or whatnot can be different, but if you keep the hubs the same, usually it eliminates this problem. But we have it a lot in cyclocross, right? Multiple wheel sets per bike, and you don't want a different hub in there. It really messes things up. When you're like, why am I going so slow? And you realize your rotor has been rubbing for the past 20 minutes. Yeah, it's no fun.
Yeah. And brake manufacturers are understanding this, and with every evolution of new disc brake that comes out, there's more and more clearance just to help reduce that situation.
So let's shift gears here a little bit.
Literally or figuratively?
Both.
Okay, good.
So we've talked about the gear. So once again, it's October, November. People are starting to get ready for their next season. What are things that you can be doing to get your body ready? And I know there's a lot of directions we can go with this, but I want to start with one. Is this a good time of year to go and be tested? And I'm going to give my answer here. I think absolutely this is the time of year to get your gear set up and figure all of it out, go get that fit. I'm not sure it's the best time of year to go and get tested because this is when you're out of shape. And I think you want to wait until you have a little bit of fitness in the legs and the test can give you a little more information. But Rob, what do you think?
Ironically, Trevor, I just tested my wife, Melissa, on Saturday because I think it's a terrific time of year. And the reason I'll say that is I always think the best time to be tested is right now, because what are you going to do between now and 8 weeks from now when you do have that better performance? Are you going to train based off of a guess? Is that going to be as efficient? I hope that testing number changes. I hope that today's testing number is not accurate 2 months from now because you have gotten better. But no, I do believe it's a great time to test. I do testing a little bit differently. I'm more focused on base paces at this point. I might not push a test quite as hard or as long. I don't really care about maximums as much. But I do want to know what that low down is because I want to make sure that we're dialed in and hitting the zones appropriately.
So Trevor, that I think depends on when this episode airs, but when was your season over? When was your last true event or your peak day? And how have you degraded to this point?
Great point.
So you might be really fit in September. I mean, some people are smoking in September, right? The World Championships are going on right now. So I think it really kind of depends on when your off season is. And a lot of people don't believe in an off season anymore. I truly believe in an off season. That said, I'm a 74-year-old bike racer. I've been racing for 50 years. And the older I've gotten, the more important it is not to get out of shape. I try never let my baseline get below a certain level. And I still do one hard workout a week, even in the off time, because that's what our friend Joe Friel says to do. Use it or lose it. Once a week, you need to bust the glass ceiling. So when is the best time to test? I think almost any time. Rest a few days, test, and you're going to know where you are at that moment to kind of set up what you want to do the next 3 months.
Yeah, I will say real quick, the caveat being it depends on what training is going to look like. Test today and then take 4-6 weeks off. Maybe today's not the best day. I brought up my wife, Melissa, because we're actually in the beginning of her build up toward next year after some time off. So.
Yeah, and I think that piggybacking off of what you were saying, Andy, about just where you're at relative to the fitness that you had, having an understanding of what that peak physical form looked like as far as your engine, and using that as a tool to guide, were you even really good at fat burning? Were you not? What's your outlook for the next season look like? And using that to maybe figure out, do you need a nutritionist? Do you need to really work on those things that on paper now with some testing are pointing out some glaringly obvious things that you could work on?
Really good point.
What else can you be doing in October, November to be getting your body ready? Besides obviously putting time in on the bike or running or whatever endurance sports you're doing.
Let's touch on stretching for a second. We talked about time trial positions or just acquiring a new position and some added flexibility you might need. So the physiology of musculotendinous connections is really well described in the literature. And it's individual dependent, but you can actually lengthen a tendon. Muscles are elastic anyway, right? So most of the time when we stretch, we kind of bounce, stretch. You're really just stretching a muscle. You're actually just going to a muscle's length. To change your range of motion, you have to affect a tendinous length change. And inside that tendon, there's a thing called a Golgi body, which looks like a little spring coil, that you have to get that Golgi body to trust you to actually let your tendon reach its full length and actually then begin to lengthen. So it takes 4 to 8 weeks to actually affect a tendinous length change. It takes about a week for you to lose those changes that you made over those 6 to 8 weeks of stretching. So the fall, people say, I'm going to spend the fall, I'm going to get flexible again. I'm going to spend my fall stretching and lifting weights. And then as soon as they start riding again in January, they stop stretching. Well, if you want to affect a position with stretching, it is not a seasonal thing. It has to be a persistent thing, right, physiologically. So stretching in the fall and then forgetting it, you might as well not bother.
It's a good point. The other thing I'd like to say about stretching as well is it may or may not be beneficial to your performance or even your wellness. These strategies need to be targeted for what you need as an individual. If you have a ton of posterior chain flexibility, then adding more probably doesn't help you. And if anything, it might decrease your stability and cause problems down the line. So make sure it's an individual recommendation that you need as an individual to meet your goals.
So I got a great example. So there's in town here in Boulder, there's a multi-time world champion marathoner from South Africa. If you figure out who he is, great. If you don't, that's okay too. Anyway, comes to me with an Achilles and hamstring strain. And I'm doing my exam and I said, oh my God, you have the tightest hamstrings on earth. Here's what we're going to need to do. He goes, shh, no, don't tell me to stretch my hamstrings. I said, they're my secret weapon. They're my accelerator. Yeah. He said, they're so tight, I've learned how to rebound from them to increase my acceleration rate. So yes, he had hamstring strain because he was so tight, but he didn't want to go into that stretching routine because those were his secret weapons. So we did everything but stretch his hamstrings to make him well. And today he still has tight hamstrings and he's really fast.
Something I say to athletes all the time is do not do stretching without concurrent functional work.
Yes.
You need to be strengthening those muscles as well. The simple way I say it to them is if all you're doing is stretching, you're just going to get floppy and then you get injured.
Yes, functional strength through that range of motion.
Well, how about off-season weightlifting? If you're going to let us stray from equipment onto to training, what about weightlifting? How's everybody feel about weightlifting in the fall?
Beefcake.
I personally am a believer in weightlifting through the entire season.
And I agree, entire season.
Yeah. And I think I'll echo, this is a Neil Henderson-ism where, he very much worked with people to increase their strength, maybe even above and beyond what they needed during the season, knowing that within season, the strength training pulls back a little bit as your riding or your running volume is coming up. So yeah, I think this is a great time to even do a little bit more strength training than you would be doing on average.
Which was going to be my comment to Trevor's year-round. As a 74-year-old, absolutely lift weights year-round, at least twice a week. But it changes. I'm back on the hip sled. I'm back, you know what I mean? I'm back doing deadlifts. I'm back doing those kind of things that I might not do more during the season. So I think your strength training can ebb and flow. It should never go away, but the style and impetus should be seasonal.
Another good point that you made to me a while back is the prioritization, because often you're doing both weights and a bike ride or a run on the same day. And my feeling is in the winter, or particularly right around now, I am prioritizing the weights. And if I get on the bike later and I'm sore and can't do as good a bike ride, I don't care. But I want a really good weight session.
Yep.
When I'm in July, I map out the bike training, prioritize that, and fit in the weights where I can. So it's a shift in the prioritization.
100%. I totally believe in that.
This is also potentially a good time to see somebody like a physical therapist who is well trained and well versed to be able to do movement screens and understand deficiencies that you may have. Again, to begin attacking them now so that you've worked through that prior to the season beginning.
That's kind of what I was thinking as it relates to the equipment side of what that looks like. Yeah, just going into the gym and doing more lifting really has no meaning behind it, then that's not really the way to go about this. So working with a really good functional strength PT to give you a plan, maybe there's a online plan that they can recommend or a way to use an online platform, especially if you don't have anybody close to you or you have your own at-home gym. Use the technology to help define those goals and move forward with a plan and a good progression.
Well, go back to Trevor's not being able to ignite his glutes in a certain position. Mm-hmm. So they've weakened.
Makes them functional.
Right? So let's think about some hip sled. Let's think about some other things that can really focus in on his glutes. So you're really going to know when you're firing them because they're going to jump out of your chamois,
I'd even say that you go into the gym and you do some of that strength that even makes that muscle sore. I feel like, especially in the glutes, you get on a bike, one, you feel the activation pattern just is there, and you can feel it because you're sore, but it doesn't feel bad comparative to if you're hiking, heavy pack, downhill, a lot of eccentric loading on your quads. You don't really feel like doing any range of motion in those quads. But like your glutes, when they're sore, I feel like you can do that range of motion. You feel that activation pattern.
Somebody mentioned about being a little more upright maybe in the winter. Well, to ignite the glutes, we have to be forward flexed. So the more we set up on the indoor bike, the less glute activation we're going to have. So I think that some parts of a workout need to be in a truly forward flexed position to put tension on. So muscles won't fire if there's not tension on them.
Exactly why I couldn't recruit my glutes, because what I noticed on my indoor bike is I have a very short stem compared to my outdoor bike. My saddle was further forward, so where I'm stretched out on my road bike, on my indoor bike, I'm probably sitting straight up.
Mm-hmm. So you can see the TV better.
I can. That is true.
That or you have to really be good at anteriorly tilting the pelvis to create some of that length of the glute, but then now you're altering how you're sitting on the bike and how you're sitting into that. And
loading your perineum.
Yeah, potentially.
Ain't no free lunch, guys. The whole idea behind bike fit and bike positioning, there's really no free lunch. And there's an activity we weren't designed to do. So the whole idea is to finding balance between all the contact points and putting ourselves in a position to utilize all of the facilities that we actually have as a human. So that the idea of bike fitting is very complicated. It is not a tape measure to measure your saddle height and your reach. It's a very complicated dance to put all your facilities in a place that they can work to their maximum.
So as we're rounding out here, got one last thing to discuss, which to me is very interesting, because if we had done this podcast 15 years ago, this wouldn't have been much of a discussion, but now it is an important part of this. There is truly an indoor season now. A lot of people out there care just as much about the indoor time as the outdoor time. And we touched on this at the beginning of the episode, but I'd kind of like to round out the conversation here of what should you also be doing right now to get your indoor setup ready if that's an important part to you. Should you have a dedicated indoor setup, or should you just be bringing your road bike in? And should you be fit on your indoor setup? Let's start with those two questions.
Real quick, before we get there, I do want to point out Wahoo released the Kicker in 2012. So you are right. 15 years ago, not a lot of smart trainers, but like 13 years ago, not so far back.
Well, Swin actually had the Velodyne before that. It was one of the original riders of the Velodyne back in the 80s. And then the CompuTrainer was, Chuck Webster, CompuTrainer. He was a fluid dynamics guy that ran a company that built pumps for fluid flow. And he was a cyclist, and the CompuTrainer came out of that. So when you ordered a CompuTrainer, you went to this plumbing site.
and I just brought us on the best tangent ever. Anyway,
Trevor, tangent.
But you had a real question in there.
So they were originally wind trainers.
Yes.
Right? I mean, I had the back wheel only that was a fan, and the harder you pedaled, the harder the fan blew.
I miss
and
my
drove your
lawn
neighbors.
revolution.
No, it drove your neighbors crazy. Thing howled. Rollers were before that, and the old coaches would stuff a towel or something under one of your rollers to increase the resistance. So, I mean, we've been trying to figure out how to work hard indoors for a long time. Smart trainers have made it, I don't know if it's easier or not. You got to be technologically sophisticated sometimes to get these things to work.
More of what I'm getting at is the shift has been, in the past, it was a training tool, but the goal was always to be out on the road doing races out there. Now there is a legitimate indoor community. There are environments like Zwift where you can race with people. So now it is a thing in and of itself, as opposed to something that helps you get to where you want to go. Now, for a lot of people, it is the goal itself. So does that change things? So that goes back to the questions of, should you be putting more work into this setup? Should you be getting it fit? All these sorts of things.
I think from a mundane aspect to indoor training, it can be a great tool just to help get you motivated, keep you motivated while being indoors versus just music in yourself, which has its place too, or just yourself.
I'm not a Swift rider, so I've never joined that community. But indoor training can be lonesome. I've always enjoyed it, and I have no problem riding indoors. I mean, riding hard indoors. I mean, I can do stuff indoors that I wouldn't do outdoors because I'd fall off, right? I mean, I can train harder indoors. But the community-wise, we've got a group, we call it the Spin Docs.
Yeah, you do.
It's every Tuesday night, November through March, and it's some of my closest friends, and we train so hard on Tuesday nights. And then with the smart trainers now, our coach, who happens to be our son, loads the workout in all of our smart trainers, and we're all doing relatively the same workout, whether one guy's FTP is 300 and another guy's is 200. We're all working, and at the end of that, we've had so much fun, and we beat each other up. We look forward to going there and getting our butts kicked, right? I mean, it's really a fantastic thing. So it's like a group ride outdoors, but it's a group ride indoors.
But does that have to be every day? Probably not.
Oh, no,
Not
we
a
couldn't
good
do it. I
choice,
couldn't
right?
survive.
Andy, there's a unique aspect to this. You are doing this as a group in the same room, right? There's the camaraderie, there's the beep talking, but now technology, Trevor, we're going to be talking in the future about velocity.
Velocity recreates that in a virtual environment.
Robbie Ventura's thing that he's going with right now. I know there are some people, I was talking with Neil Henderson last night about it, that are getting good success, but it's, platforms like this are maybe worthwhile exploring right now. I personally get nothing from Zwift, to tell you the truth. Like the virtual world, I don't know, it's great, but it doesn't engage me like riding outside does, let's be honest. So I think that this is a good time for people to experiment in platforms that engage them, which I think ultimately is the most important. I couldn't care less what the platform is, as long as it gets you on the bike, keeps you happy, keeps you motivated.
I think having good gear, trying to go outside first, to me, that's just more important for the soul, even just to be outside. So I think first and foremost, having the right gear for that is always important. You were talking about setup. And so I think making sure that your setup is actually sound and healthy, and it's not going to create new wear patterns on your body that now you're coming out more injured than ready for the season. So I think those are aspects to the indoor versus outdoor.
As we talk about indoor, I think that something to throw out there right now, something that keeps you on the bike longer than anything, in my opinion, are fans, right? Keeping yourself cool, keeping yourself comfortable is really important. I think that this is a good thing to be investing in. And I'll say there are two things that have worked really well for me. One, I'm not plugging them specifically, even though I'm plugging them specifically. Vornado seems like it works really, really well because of the focused sort of airstream really can hit your body. The other thing that works pretty well are sort of the industrial blowers that are probably meant for like drying your carpet after a flood or something. They tend to be a little bit louder, but they move a lot of air. For me, if I don't have things like this, creature comfort, so to say, to keep me comfortable, I can't last on the trainer very long. And it feels a little steep to invest in like brand name $100 Vornado fan, but it makes all the difference in the world, if you ask me.
I've known you a long time, Rob, and you are a sweat hog.
I am a sweaty bastard. I appreciate you know me that well, Andy, by the way.
Oh, that's funny. I also think about the hydration side of this, just from some of the testing that I do. And often there's this mindset that's just different indoors where I feel like people forget that they are sweating, possibly even more in some climates where they're actually 75 degrees inside and they're not used to that kind of weather condition, period. And so, yeah, just making sure that you're drinking more and keeping up with that hydration.
Well, the other thing I'm going to bring up here, and where I was leading the question a little bit ago.
Trevor's like, guys, you're missing the
Pull us
point.
back in.
No, it just, so like I'm one of those people that became a full convert. You know, I, through most of my cycling career, would go out and do a 6-hour ride when it's negative 20 out because I hated the trainer that much.
You're Canadian.
And I'm Canadian.
Let's be honest.
And you're
I'll
stubborn.
do that. I have completely flipped to, in the winter, I am primarily on the trainer. Part of it is because I'm at work all day, so the only time I have daylight to get outside is on the weekends. And I have maintained an old mindset of, well, it's the trainer, so I don't need to make sure the bike's set up right. I don't need to make sure this gear is very good. And it looks like I have, because I had a bad setup on my indoor, trained really bad habits that's now moved out onto the road. And I didn't really consider that because I just continued that mindset of it's the trainer setup. Who cares? And I think anybody who's like me, who's spending more and more time on Zwift, more and more time on, you know, something like Velocity, on these different setups, spending a lot of time indoor, I think you need to take it as seriously.
Agreed. And I think we've made the point really clear. I think that the indoor setup needs to closely resemble your outdoor setup. Absolutely. You do some sweat testing, right?
I do.
So back to Trevor's question, is this a good time to be tested? Well, he was talking about physiologically testing, I think, but tell us about that. And when is the right time to do that? I think indoors we do tend to sweat a lot.
Yeah, I mean, there's different philosophies on hydration, how you do it, whether electrolytes are important, not important, and that's a personal choice, I would say. There is some research to say both ways are correct. So for me, I do some testing through precision hydration. It looks at sodium composition in your sweat. So it's how much sodium are you losing as an individual, which is genetically determined. Everybody's sweat gland is a little different, but you could have a pretty large spread, anywhere from a couple hundred milligrams of sodium per liter of sweat loss to 2,200 milligrams of sodium per liter of sweat. And again, there's a little bit of philosophical ideas, researches all over the place to say what is the best way to do this. But in some recommendation that we're offering is this idea of replenishment from what you're losing. And so indoors, there's a lot of demand on just sweat, especially under the higher intensities, even if it's for a short amount of time. You know, if you're somebody who loses easily 1.5 liters to 2 liters on the moderate to moderately high range, then now let's say you also lose 1,500 milligrams of sodium per that 1 liter and you've lost 2 liters, that's 3,000 milligrams of sodium lost. And your body might store in your bloodstream somewhere 8 to 10,000 for somebody kind of average size male rider. So really you're depleting yourself. And so that needs to get replenished for sake of just hydration status, which helps with recovery, will help with mood, helps with sleep, helps with cognitive mindset. So I think I see the people who have gone indoors and they're coming towards the season, they're thinking about getting tested, which in this case, you can test anytime and it's the same information. It's not like your normal physiological testing that's changing over time because it's genetically determined. And so in this case, I see these people who have been training through the winter and they're coming out ready to race, but they're feeling flat because they've just been sipping on a water here and there just in their indoor training, and they're coming up more dehydrated, especially around here because we're in a very dry climate during the winter, right? And so they're actually coming out of the winter undertrained in a way, or just feeling very flat. And then they start to improve their hydration status, even if that's just drinking more water, and they see a big benefit. So I see it from that angle as well. So paying attention to little details about hydration status. So,
Well, guys, I hate to say it. We've been talking for an hour 20 now. We're pretty close to. So this has been a great conversation, but I think we need to wind it up. So Ryan, you're new to the show. We finish our episodes with our take homes. It's so you have 1 minute to kind of summarize what you think is the most important or salient point you want everybody to take from this episode. So let's give you a second to think about it since you didn't know we were going to do this. Andy, do you want to go first with this one?
I think the point made here is that our indoor setup is really important and that it deserves the same attention as the outdoor setup. So a bike you ride, it's a bike you ride. Whether it's indoors or outdoors, it deserves similar attention in the way you sit on it and the way you use it. If you change product, if you change equipment, saddles especially, let's remember the saddle is the center of the fit universe. A saddle change demands that you look at all the other basic bike fit measurements.
Yeah, thanks for that, Andy. Yeah, I would say just to add to that would be this is a great time to come and look at equipment choice, consult with your fitter on the equipment that you're using, your indoor setup, and reflecting on just what happened in this season while it's fresh in your mind. Don't wait till the spring when you kind of forgot exactly what you did, how you trained, all the issues you were having, and let's address those now with both equipment, time with the fitter, with your PT, and start your plan going forward.
Ryan, I'm maybe just going to tack on to yours a little bit more because awesome summary in my mind. This is a great time to experiment if you're going to experiment. We all know you shouldn't be trying anything just before race day. But as you're doing those experiments, just make sure that you're doing it with purpose, right? Don't change for the sake of change. Maybe get some guidance from someone. At the very least, look back at what your strengths and weaknesses were, what those little niggling pains were, and move from there as you choose the things to make improvements on moving forward.
So my take home is I'm going to see just how hypocritical I can be in 1 minute.
Oh my God.
So this is something I'm very guilty of, is getting a setup that you like, find a bike that you like, find shoes that you like, find a saddle that you like, get it all set up, and then get into that mindset of now everything's perfect. I'm not going to touch everything.
Yeah, Trevor welds everything into place so it can't possibly move.
The issue that we all have is everything breaks down. Everything stops working well. Your saddle, as Rob pointed out, I've cracked a few saddles too. You might crack them. Your cleats wear down. Your shoe inserts wear down. All these things just stop functioning as well. So unfortunately, it's just an ongoing thing. Even if at one point you had the perfect setup with all the perfect gear, of trying to keep it all functional and working well. And to me, this is a good time of the year to do that check-in. Just look at everything and go, hey, how is my saddle doing? How are my cleats doing? How are my shoes doing? Check all these things and say, is it time to do something about these? And go see a bike fitter to say, you know, how am I looking on the bike? Not a great thing to take care of all that 2 weeks before your key event, which is also really hypocritical because I saw Ryan last week in Tobago. My one target event of the year is next week.
Better late than never, Trevor.
Do as I say, not as I do in this particular one because I'm not a great example.
But you've learned.
I've learned. I
But
just
you've
don't
learned.
listen to myself.
Mm-hmm. Love it.
All right. Thanks, guys. That was a lot of fun.
Thank you, guys.
That was another episode of Fast Talk. The thoughts and opinions expressed on Fast Talk are those of the individual. Subscribe to Fast Talk wherever you prefer to find your favorite podcast. Be sure to leave us a rating and a review. As always, we'd love your feedback. Tweet us at Fast Talk Labs. Join the conversation at forums.fasttalklabs.com or learn from our experts at fasttalklabs.com. From Ryan Ignatz, Dr. Andy Pruitt, and Rob Pickles, I'm Trevor Connor. Thanks for listening.